Right, so with me is Jarrod Kimber. He'll be well known to followers of cricket all around the world and followers of cricket media in particular. Just give you a run through of some of his work. He's done a lot of work on Cricinfo, often appears on Polite Inquiries. He's done work for TalkSport. He's done work in the CPL in terms of strategy, if I'm not mistaken.
I was a general manager in the end.
Right, okay, right. And he's got over 50,000 followers on Twitter. So
some of them I paid for.
And I can't go without mentioning Death of a Gentleman, and you were the documentary maker and really at the forefront of that. I first came across Jarrod in 2009 when Pakistan were playing the World T20 here, and they beat South Africa in the semi-final at Trent Bridge, and you wrote an article on Shahid Afridi, and I think Q, who was a popular Pakistan blogger at the time, he brought me to your attention, and in terms of the work you do, and I've sort of followed your career since then, more so in the infancy of your career, before you've gone into mainstream media. So let's get on to the questions. Jarrod, who inspired you to take up this profession?
No one really. I never really thought I was going to be a cricket writer, so it wasn't like I was looking at other cricket writers thinking that...
Was there anyone you looked up to in terms of not necessarily a cricket writer, a commentator, someone who works in the cricket media that you would have liked to be like?
No, I can promise you there, absolutely no one. I was a screenwriter.
Yeah.
Worked in films. Was trying to get up some documentary projects. And my heroes are screenwriters mostly, or novelists.
Right.
And then I had started some blogs because I enjoyed blogs at the time, and it was quite an interesting time for writing because it was the first time where you didn't really have to know anyone to write.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you could write whatever you wanted. It didn't have to fit into what a magazine wanted or a newspaper would want. You just wrote, and it suited my writing style because I didn't really write like other people, so I couldn't write like other people. So I started doing that, and then I had a friend who was a guy called Todd Spear. Don't have his book here to plug on your thing, but he wrote a book on Drazen Petrovic, a very good writer himself, and he was trying to start a basketball blog, and I was explaining to him how blogging is different to other writing and what he should be thinking about, and he said, why don't you write a cricket blog in your spare time? And so I did. So it wasn't so much that I wanted to be Gideon Haigh or Christopher Martin Jenkins or any of those sorts of people. I didn't really even follow them that much. I probably hadn't read a cricket book in quite a few years. I just watched a lot of cricket and grew up in a cricket environment. The closest I would say to someone who inspired me, and they probably didn't inspire me, but they probably what they did was they thought about cricket in a similar way to me, was Peter Roebuck. So
suicide in the end, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, no one's quite sure, but let's go with that for now.
Yes.
But essentially, Peter Roebuck was an Englishman who spent a lot of time in South Africa, but also lived in Australia. Thought of himself as an Australian by the end of his life, and he would write these articles on Australian cricket that were quite critical, and I don't mean critical in a nasty way, as in to say Australian cricket's terrible or anything like that. But he wrote about them in a way of, here's where Australia's great, but here's where Australia could be better. These are things that people have said about the team that don't make any sense. And he kept doing that. And it was the way that I looked at cricket, because for whatever reason, perhaps because I grew up in a cricket house, for me, cricket didn't start as the Australian team.
Right.
It really started as my dad's local team, then my local team, then it became Victoria, then it became Australia, then it became Pakistan as much as anything, then it became the global game. So for me, cricket was always more important. So when someone would say something like, I remember someone said that Adam Gilchrist was the best batsman in the world a year into his career, and Peter Roebuck was on radio with this person and just went, well, he can't be the best batsman in the world. Brian Lara still exists, Sachin Tendulkar exists, Steve Waugh is still around. What we've seen is 1 year where he's played a lot of tests at home and had a couple of good innings away from home. That sort of thinking, I remember hearing that stuck with me forever, of that's what you should be doing. You should be looking at logic. And fans and the media at times, they basically hype up their own players. They don't watch the global game. So I suppose if I had any inspiration, it would be Peter Roebuck. But to be honest, Albert Camus and Quentin Tarantino are probably more influential on who I am as a writer than any of anyone in cricket.
It's an interesting choice because he was quite a controversial character in cricket, wasn't he, Peter Roebuck? I mean, with what he did at Somerset and getting rid of Viv Richards and Joel Garner as a player.
Yeah, he was controversial as a player. He also, I don't think we can dodge the issue here. He sexually assaulted young boys in his care. He perhaps was grooming other young boys in South Africa, which was part of what happened at the end. But
purely from the writing point of view.
Yeah, it's not even the writing, although I did enjoy his writing, but it wasn't even the writing. You had to have, if you were brought up in Australia in the 90s and 2000s, that era where we were basically fed this line that we were absolutely invincible and we would never ever lose another cricket game and we were brilliant, which in some ways was obviously true. We probably were one of the best, if not the best, eras of that any team's ever had. But there's also obviously signs of that the next generation wasn't going to be as good. There were problems with the way that the game was being run. There was problems with the coaching structure of the game, and we're still having those same problems now. Darren Lehman came in as coach and basically said, just go out there and whack the ball. In modern cricket, there's a lot more to think about than just that. So, for me, what Roebuck was really showing was possible was that you could follow the Australian cricket team. And still point out things that were not perfect. And in that period, no one else was doing that. So for me, I spent most of my time reading cricket writers that you'd never have heard of, guys like Ken Peace and Rod Nicholson, guys who wrote about Shield cricket.
Right, so focused on the domestic game in Australia.
Yeah, and also they were the local cricket writers. So they wrote in Melbourne. And so the major cricket writer when I grew up was probably a guy called Crash Craddock.
Right.
Who's a lovely guy, and I probably
he does interviews, isn't he, for Fox? I've come across.
He does now. He's sort of semi-retired. I think that's okay if I say that, Crash. I think he's semi-retired. He doesn't tour anymore, but Crash, he basically was the voice of Australian cricket in the Murdoch world, and I grew up in an area where most people read the Murdoch newspapers, and my family certainly did. So I read everything that Crash wrote, and I read everything that the local guys wrote, and then as I got older, I moved on to the other newspapers, but realistically, there's nothing that Crash wrote that changed my writing style. I knew of Gideon Hagen. I would read the odd article, but he didn't inspire me to become a writer. So I was already a writer, and I already knew a lot about cricket. I kind of combined those two things myself rather than through someone else.
You mentioned Crash Craddock there. I remember he interviewed Jeff Lawson, and Jeff Lawson was talking about his time in Pakistan and how he was training in Abbottabad, where Osama bin Laden was hiding very close to those places, and that immediately comes to my mind.
You're saying Jeff Lawson was hiding? It's possible.
But so I've definitely come across him, and he's very good at those interviews. I'm not sure if you come across them on Fox.
No, I've seen them. I've seen them. And look, Crash is very good. He's got a great knowledge of cricket. He's a very passionate man. It's funny to grow up reading someone, and then he was such a big part of my life because there weren't that many cricket writers in Australia. Most people in Australia write about cricket and football and cricket and rugby, whatever the combination is, cricket and tennis sometimes.
All-round sports writers.
Yeah, so Crash was the cricket guy before Malcolm Conn sort of became that sort of that guy. So for me, it's not that he inspired me, but how much more did I learn about the game just by having read him? And that's why I talk about the state cricket writers as well, because Brendan McCardle, and there's so many of them out there that, Darren Berry wrote a lot about Shield cricket later on as well. Like, there's so many of those guys that gave you so much extra information. It doesn't mean that they necessarily inspired you, but the fact that they existed and that they were so good at their jobs gave me extra information.
They influenced you in some way.
Well, no, it built my knowledge base.
Okay.
As much as anything. It's not like I ever, thought to myself, I want to be the next Ken Peace. There's already a Ken Peace. But what I thought was, Ken Peace has written about some Shield player who's not even in the best 11 at the moment. And I've got more information about them. So those sorts of guys do incredible jobs. But as far as inspiration, there's no one I ever looked at. When Cricket with Balls started, the blog, I remember someone said it was like a combination of Richie Benno and Chuck Palahniuk, the Fight Club writer. And that Chuck Palahniuk is probably more of an inspiration to me than Richie Benno is. That doesn't mean that Richie Benno didn't play a big part in my life, but I never went, I want to be a cricket commentator. In fact, I never thought, I don't think there was any stage when I was growing up that I ever thought I'd be a cricket writer or a cricket commentator or anything like that.
So you were very much a late entrant into this field.
Yeah.
Now, coming back to your inspirations, have you ever had the chance to obviously meet them and work with them? The likes of Peter Roebuck and Crash Craddock, have you firstly had the chance to meet with them, and then Have you had the chance to work with them in any sort of capacity?
Oh, I mean, certainly you meet everyone in the cricket media. It's not a very big environment, so there aren't that many of us out there. Crash, I've spent a bit of time with. I really like Crash. Peter, I only met once or twice when I was coming through. So sadly, as you said, he perhaps committed suicide. We don't really know what happened there fully, but certainly I didn't get to know him that well, but I had some decent chats with him. So I suppose for me that as a cricket person, Martin Crowe was maybe my biggest influence. When I was a kid, I used to dress like Martin Crowe.
And you're talking about the player here, Martin Crowe, the player?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So no one in my competition wore thigh pads, but Martin Crowe wore a thigh pad, so I stole a thigh pad from the senior team and stuffed it down my trousers. I wore a white helmet for about 3 years because Martin Crowe wore a white helmet. And then later on in life, I was lucky enough that Martin became a big reader of my writing.
And during the 2015 World Cup, presumably you were in Australia and New Zealand and you got the chance to meet him?
Well, I actually met him before then.
Okay.
I met him in India. It was a very weird story because he is, there's probably about 3 people in my life that were incredible influences in just many different ways. So there's the actor Alan Alda, was probably one of them. Another one is probably Quentin Tarantino, and the third one is probably Martin Crowe. The 3 people that have had the most to do with shaping who I've ended up becoming, outside of people I know and the sort of Australian stuff. Martin Crowe, I was in this big fancy Indian hotel with Cricinfo, and someone screaming at me from the other side of the lobby, Kimber, Kimber. And I look up and there's this big bald guy running at me, and I was like, who's this guy? And it's Martin Crowe coming over. And to be fair, I think I've written about this before. Martin really wanted to become friends, and he loved long form writing as well. He's a big fan of George Dobell and Gideon Haigh and a few other guys who do what I do. And he really wanted to become close, but I couldn't ever become friends with Martin Crowe because he had too much of a say in my development as a child. So there was a certain point where my absolute hero growing up, I was pushing him away,
right,
because it was too much for me, if that makes sense. So and it was a shame, and maybe I shouldn't have done that. He died shortly after that, but look, they say never meet your heroes. I loved meeting him, but there was a certain point where I couldn't ever get over the Martin Crowe that was in my head, and obviously the Martin Crowe I met was a different man. He'd been through cancer a couple of times by that point, bad divorces, bad career choices, sort of up, and I think he had an alcohol problem at one stage as well. So the Martin Crowe that I met wasn't the Martin Crowe that I loved when I was 10. And you get that a lot in cricket. Richie, I remember meeting Richie a couple of times, and not being unimpressed by him, but he was just an old man by the time I met him.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like he wasn't
as active. Yeah.
Yeah. Tim Lane is another one. Tim Lane's not very famous in world cricket, but in Australia, I still think he's the best cricket commentator I've ever heard. Probably almost anywhere really, but certainly in Australia. Meeting him again, it is weird, but it is kind of what you do. I remember one day being in the wasn't in the press box, but I think it was out in the food thing, and Wazam Akram tapped me on the shoulder to ask me a question about something I've been saying to someone. What a ridiculous situation that you live in, that Wazam Akram is coming to talk to you and to say stuff. And I've had Shane Warne do similar things, and I don't think Wazam Akram knows who I am necessarily, but I was there and I was talking about something and he wanted to know about it. Or wanted me to repeat what I just said. And, you do find yourself in cricket media in those sort of ridiculous situations a lot.
Right. So relating this back to yourself, do you ever have to pinch yourself at what you've achieved in terms of the popularity and the fame that you've gained since coming into this industry?
I don't know. Everything comes so slowly.
Right.
It's not like you suddenly...
It's not something overnight.
Yeah. So I started writing about cricket in 2007. I didn't get a full-time job in cricket till 2012.
Right.
So it's not as if I was, everything's been an incremental gain. I think a lot of people trying to get into sports media and dream jobs like this in general, they sort of think that someone's going to tap you on the shoulder and say, "You've got it, kid. Here you go." But it's not how it works. It's not how it works for sport that often, let alone in other industries. So what happens is some editor who no one's ever heard of but is quite respected in the field will say something along the lines of, will say something along the lines of, "Oh, I think you're quite good," and you get a bump from that. And maybe you get some work with them or some work with someone that they know, but it doesn't actually. There's no moment where you've made it. And it's something I actually try and teach in my sports writing course, which is unless you're Tom Cruise, no one really thinks they've made it. I remember having a conversation with Gideon Haigh about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and he's like, I think Death of a Gentleman was coming to the end. And I was like, I don't know what to do next. I don't know where I am with my career. I don't know what's happening now. And he goes, that's okay. Just keep following that. And that's how I've done it. So I think there's certainly an element of surprise. I didn't finish high school. I didn't really go to university other than 1 year of a TAFE course doing film school. I didn't study journalism or go to journalism or have a cadetship, all the normal things you do. When I got into sports writing, I didn't really know any cricketers, let alone cricket writers, but I didn't know any cricketers, so I didn't have any contacts. So I basically came complete from outside of this world, and then have done very well in it. So there's a point of that, but that's taken 12 years. So, I suppose I can't believe that I've got to this point in my career, but it's not the pinch yourself moment that I think that you might get. Maybe that might happen further down the line, but there's a lot of things I haven't done. I've actually won 2 sports journalism awards in the UK for Death of a Gentleman and for the TalkSport coverage, and I've never been at either award ceremony.
With the SJA?
Yeah, the SJAs. Yeah. And I haven't actually been there to collect either of them.
You've been abroad.
The first one, I swear, when it was me and Sam and it was Death of a Gentleman, we honestly thought we had no chance of winning.
Right.
And I'd been touring for ages, and it was a night back with my wife and my kids. And I said to Sam, because Sam said, I don't want to go, can you go? And I said, look, just got back. And then the SJAs actually contacted Sam and said, well, hopefully one of you will be attending. And that should have been a clue to us that we were going to win. Right. But even then I didn't go, so I didn't go. And the next one, when TalkSport won, I was away touring. So perhaps to go up and accept an award like that in front of an audience of people who do come from the kind of backgrounds that I didn't come from. So, people that did finish high school, that did study journalism, that did go through newspapers, that did grow up in sporting environments and news sports stars. Maybe for them to stand up and clap for me winning an award. Maybe that is that moment. But I've never actually been there. The closest I've probably had is when the film when Death of a Gentleman came out, and doing the Q&As and those sorts of things. So we had a Q&A with maybe 500 or 600 people, and Michael Holding's on stage with us doing the Q&A. Well, Gideon Haigh and Michael Holding and Andy Zoltzman. So a couple of people I'm very close with, but also, high profile people, and Michael Holding. Then we did the other one with Lalit Modi, which was insane. And having 500 people and having Henry Blofeld in the audience come to watch your movie and be there for the Q&A and all that sort of thing.
Purely as a fan.
Yeah, as a fan. Those sorts of things. In fact, we've already discussed a bit, that a lot of my influences came from outside of cricket, and one is the actor Ben Mendelsohn, who is a very famous character actor. He's been in Star Wars recently. He's been in a bunch of hit shows and a few big movies. I actually did an event where he was in the audience and he came out to watch. And then as I was leaving, he came over to say how much he liked my work, because he was involved in an Australian film that always been very close to my heart, and I've always loved him as an actor. Those sorts of things are almost more interesting to me, but it's not pinch yourself. It's just a constant state of weirdness, and it doesn't really go away. When I worked for St Lucia as a team analyst, and I'm out on the field chatting to Karen Pollard about strategy before a game. Do you know what I mean? Right. It's weird. The whole thing is weird to me, because I never thought I'd be in this situation, and I didn't really plan to be in this situation. So I'm not sure if it's pinch yourself as much as I do spend a lot of my time. I've got a mate back home. He's my cousin, but he's kind of like my brother, really. And occasionally I'll just send him a message just going, so I've just done this. just so I can actually tell someone I've done it. Because most of my friends now are in this industry and they won't find it as full on. But it's I created a very weird world for myself.
Right. Just a few more questions on yourself before we move on to modern cricket. What do you typically do in a press box during a day at the cricket? Is it all fun and games, or is it a lot of hard work behind the scenes, typing away on the laptop? Do you actually get to enjoy the cricket and, as a fan would, see a bowler running in, think strategically about the game, what shot's going to be played, how they're trying to get him out? Or is it, lots of hard work and you're not really able to enjoy and take in the cricket that much? So what would you typically do at a day at the cricket, say before play, during play, after play, and do you actually get to enjoy the action, or is it a lot of the time on your laptop, searching things, writing things, and just occasionally glancing up at the cricket? What's it like in the press box during a day at the cricket?
There's no one day, especially, so my job is not like other people's jobs. So for most writers, they have to get their maybe file something at lunch and tea, small reports perhaps for their newspapers or for their agency or sometimes for websites as well. Then they file a match report of some kind, and they might fold in quotes from the post-match chat or post-day chat into that, or they might do those separately. So that's kind of what most people do. So most writers aren't really writing throughout the day, but towards maybe the last hour, I suppose, in cricket, people start to do it. So if you're ever in a press box, you can kind of laugh and joke around at all times except for lunch and tea, because there are people working at lunch and tea. But for the rest of the day, you can sort of talk and chat and have fun. And then the last hour, if you do that, you will get a lot of stern looks from people as they start to do their work. But mine is very different, and it depends on what I'm doing on a particular day. I write a lot of very deep, in-depth pieces that are quite long. So you can't write those in the last hour of the day. You need to have sometimes a lot of the research I might have even done beforehand, but I'm doing that during the day. There's a very sort of a trick that you learn quite early on in cricket writing, which is essentially, without knowing it, you kind of train yourself to how long a fast bowler will take from the ball being bowled until him bowling the next one. And you know that you have 25 seconds to look down, maybe find a new website, maybe look for a new stat, whatever it is you're trying to do, read an article, look at a YouTube video, all those sorts of things. Those are things I do in the day, but I kind of try and do that in that little gap. And sometimes you don't, sometimes you get it wrong, and you look, and you basically everyone around you makes a noise, and you look up and go, oh, I've missed that ball. But that's kind of how you train yourself in general. It was weird that it's Peter Roebuck who told my friend Jesse Hogan that cricket writers don't close their laptop enough.
Right.
And it's hard because, it is part of the job, and also even more so with social media. But there are days when I do that. There are days when I basically write down a note on every ball. And probably, I do sometimes give myself headaches from working so hard and watching the game so hard. And there are other days when I purposely don't watch the game very hard because I'm waiting for a moment or a theme to come out and I want it to grab me itself. So there's lots of different ways. Look, it is fun in the same way that, any job where you're sitting with, if you're lucky, friends or colleagues that you like is fun because there's a lot of watching. But you then have, if you think about it from an office work point of day, there's a lot of sitting around and not doing much where you're watching something incredible, and then there is between 1 hour and 5 hours of intense work at the end of the day. So I feel exhausted coming back, and it's a hard thing for my wife, who actually works a real job, as a lawyer and works all day. She's just like, you've just been sitting at the cricket all day, but the concentration, the other work that you have, and then the sort of doing the job at the end of the day, it is quite interesting. But you do see it, and you also see a lot more than a fan sees, because you have the access to the game in front of you and a TV screen, right? And a lot of guys, I don't do this personally, but a lot of guys also have the radio on in their ear. So and if you include social media in that, you then almost have 4 different ways of looking at the game. So fans aren't doing that. Fans are usually either watching on TV and social media or at the ground and social media. So to be able to do that, but there's a huge sort of mental effort in there. And then you need to also know that at the end of the day, you need to then knock out the piece. It's not coal mining. Do you know what I mean? There are tougher jobs. I've certainly, I was a landscape gardener. I worked in factories. I parked cars for a living. They, in some ways, they're all a lot tougher. But it's quite an extreme job. And then at the end, your work is then judged by other people. If you're a newspaper, there's, about being a paper of record. If you're a cricket website like Cricinfo, the fans who are following that are uber fans, so they know every detail. So you can't really afford to get anything wrong there. So there's a lot of fun involved, and then these weird spurty times of incredible work. But I
suppose that's for the written press. What about for say pundits who come up in the press box who are involved with a TV channel or those type of people who are not necessarily writing but are covering the game in a different sort of way? I suppose they can enjoy it a bit more in the press box.
No, it's quite weird. You've got to remember that if you are a TV or a radio person, right, you are doing between 20 and 40 minutes sometimes of broadcasting. 20 and 40 minutes of broadcasting is quite an intense thing on your brain, right? It takes a certain energy out of you. You're not yourself. Right, you are a performer to a certain point. You're following the game. You're listening to the directors and the producers. You're trying to cover what's on the screen, but you're also trying to see if you can add anything to it. So quite often for those people, they need to switch off as well. So writers generally watch more cricket than commentators and pundits, just because it's kind of what we have to do. Whereas realistically, if you're on radio, you can, it's maybe not ideal, but you can be an expert on the 30 minutes that you're on air, as long as you know roughly what's happened before. Whereas in cricket writing, you probably need to know a little bit more. So, it's a work environment. That doesn't mean we don't have fun at work, and but there's a lot of elderly and middle-aged commentators who take naps.
Right.
In the day, maybe some of them are partying too hard and some are maybe beyond their best, but it does take it out of you. I know. I do for TalkSport. I've done ball by ball. I've done analyst job, and I do this new role, which is kind of like a combination of a scorer and an analyst as the third person in the chair. They're all quite tiring in different ways.
I guess my question was more so, say someone does not have the rights to cover the actual live cricket, but they're doing a pre-match show or a post-match show, or just doing a few bits and pieces during a lunch interval or a tea interval of a test match or an interval of a one-day game. I suppose they're able to enjoy the cricket a bit more. They're not either writing or they're commentating while the cricket's actually on.
Well, there aren't that many of them that are allowed in the ground. If you don't have rights, you usually can't be in the ground.
Right.
So those people are usually back in studios. It does happen, of course.
For example, I'll give you an example here. Say Ian Healy, I saw him at the Oval Test match. Obviously, he wasn't part of any commentary team, but I saw him.
He was commentating.
Oh, was he?
He's commentating back for Australia, so he was doing stuff. Okay. It's very rare that someone has that position you have. I mean, I did TalkSport's podcast this year for the Ashes, and in some ways I did that. But I'm not sure I watched any more cricket than I would have as a cricket writer. There aren't many. What would you call them? Hangers-on people who don't have something to do. Right. You do get a few camera people sometimes because they might just be needed at certain times, so they can watch a lot of cricket sometimes. But usually people are working. Usually they're doing something. If you're a camera person and you filmed a bunch of stuff before the game, you probably have to cut up and edit it or send it back to the studio or cut up packages for later on. It's very much a work environment. The sort of things that you're talking about, you might get people who come in, but they don't usually have seats in the press box. So they're usually sort of floating between the broadcast area, the food area, and the press box. But there isn't really as much of a thing in cricket grounds that I've been to. There's a few old cricket writers who still have press accreditation who don't seem to write for anyone. They might do it, but no one's watching any more cricket than a normal cricket writer because that's kind of the gig. You have to. And I think there was maybe a time when cricket writers were a bit more, I don't want to say blasé, but maybe a bit more casual with how they did stuff. And social media has blown that out of the water. If you're John Etheridge and you write for The Sun, right? In the old days, most Sun readers are not cricket fans. Yeah. They're not. They don't know who John Etheridge is. There's no way for them to get back in touch with John Etheridge. And most of them aren't following it that closely, if at all. They're following it through John Etheridge. Now, John Etheridge is on Twitter, and even if he writes something, a non-Sun reader might come across it, and they'll make him explain it. So he can't be as casual. He has to be more accurate. So social media has certainly done that. So I would say in my time, people are watching the cricket more closely than ever before. And I think it's partly just because there's a higher standard now. There's, you know, there used to be newspaper people here and the rest of us down here. It's a bit more, you know, mixed now. You can be like me and be a decent blogger and end up with a job in this. So I would say that most people watch, and as far as enjoyment goes, I watch a lot of terrible cricket.
Right.
There are times where my job is going to dull cricket games over and over again. Series where the away team's never going to win, where they're clearly not up to it. They're trying to juggle their team around so they don't get smashed. And then this summer, I saw New Zealand beat India in the World Cup semi-final. I saw England and New Zealand in the World Cup final. I saw Tim Murtagh destroy England at Lord's. I then saw Steve Smith at Edgbaston, followed by the Headingley finish. So it comes and goes. You can't enjoy every moment of cricket because you can't enjoy every moment of everything. You can't enjoy every moment of ice cream, right? So there's a certain point, and it is a job. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a fun job, and I think maybe I probably have less sick days in this job than I would in any other day, because even if I'm sick, I probably drag myself out to work. Though I did, I turned up for the World Cup semi-final? Yeah, I turned up for the World Cup semi-final, Australia-England, and I couldn't talk. And I was supposed to be commentating for a radio station in Australia. And I still went, and I still tried. So that shows you how great the job is. You still do that, even when you probably should be in bed napping. But it is still a job. There are still things I need to do. I love 3-day and 4-day test matches because I get a day off. I'm a fan of wickets anyway, so maybe there's a cricket side of that. But, there's a great line in a Cypress Hill song where he says, it's a fun job, but it's still a job. And that's kind of how I look at cricket writing. It's a fun job, but it's still a job. I still have to do the work. But I'm lucky enough that I'm inspired to do the work.
Just clearing up on one thing, I mentioned Ian Healy there. As far as I'm aware, he was there for Fox or Channel 9, because I know Channel 9 still have the rights to the Ashes and the World Cup this summer. I thought he was just doing punditry during the lunch interval, tea interval, like before the game, and they were taking Sky's coverage.
I mean, I wasn't back in Australia, but as far as I was aware, that they were doing some commentary as well.
Okay.
But
perhaps they, do, like Sony do, sometimes have half an hour of their own commentators and half an hour of Sky.
It's very possible. They certainly had their own room in their own booth. But as I said, that those sorts of jobs don't really exist as much as you think. Sometimes for...
I guess what I'm looking for is a reporter.
There aren't many reporters who cover cricket because there are so many. But basically, because the way that cricket is, it set itself up around the world to not really allow that. But if you're a reporter, how are you watching any more cricket than a cricket writer is? A cricket writer is still watching that same amount of cricket. So there's not like there's a magical job where you sit there and you don't do much. You're still, everyone's sort of doing the same. There are better jobs as far as doing less work. But realistically, you shouldn't be. You can enjoy the cricket, and I think, or the football, whatever sport you're covering. And I think you should. I think enjoying the sport and being a passionate fan of the sport is important. But that's the thing that should drive what you do. But essentially, you're there to be impartial and to pass the information over as best you can. If you're too much of a fan, that will affect your work.
Right, I see.
And by that I mean an impartial fan. A partial fan. I think you should be an impartial fan. You should certainly be a fan of the sport itself.
I suppose you still have your favourites.
There's no way not to do that.
There's a certain batsman you really want to enjoy watching, and
you want your team to beat the other team. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And I still want Australia to beat England and to beat South Africa.
Well, I guess you're not overly fussed about the results anymore now that you're in this industry.
There's a certain point where, this was my, 6th or 7th Ashes. When Australia won in 2013-14, if you'd have asked me up until them winning the deciding test, the Perth test, I probably would have said something along the lines of, I've got no stake in this game, I'm just here to report. But when they actually won, and it was my first time covering an Ashes where Australia won, I did notice that fan came out of me. But then I have to go back and do the work. And you can't repress all of it, of course. It is what it is. But there are, I've got friends in the English team. Do you know what I mean? Like, I especially now at this point, I know cricketers all around the world. I have relationships with New Zealand cricketers and West Indian cricketers, and I'll be working with the Scotland team coming up shortly as their analyst, and then in the future I'll probably end up having to write about them again. Those sorts of things do happen, and it's such a small industry. But realistically, the fanning out, there is an element of that, but those journalists never last because they're not good writers, they're not good reporters. If you're too much of a fan, generally. It means you're not good at other things. So you have to work out how to almost harness your passion, which is, I suppose, what I try and do as a cricket writer. Is why am I so interested in this player right now? There must be a reason. I'm now going to go and write about that.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to some cricketing issues and some talking points in modern cricket. We're going to start with the 100, talk of the town these days. I'll first give you my take on it. I think it's... I like it for a few reasons. It's something different, and terrestrial TV coverage in this country I think will be huge for the game. And it's not just another T20 league. I mean, we have so many of them now coming up all over the world. This is something different, something unique, something fresh. And it's a city franchise-based competition. It's diverting from the traditional 18-county structure. And even 2020, it takes a long time. I mean, look at the IPL game. Sometimes to bowl, best part of 2 hours to bowl 20 overs. So if this is just a slightly modified version of T20, and yes, it's a different format, but I think it's got a USP to it. What's your take on the 100, and are you looking forward to perhaps covering it?
I don't know what my role will be, whether I'll be covering it, whether I'll be working in it, or whether I'll just be spectating.
Initial impressions of the concept.
Well, I think the concept's ridiculous.
Right.
I don't think they needed to do it. I think they made a bunch of hasty decisions based on poor research and bad conversations I had with with some broadcasters. So, for instance, shortening the game, the BBC wanted it to be shorter, and also they went to Mumsnet, the big women's or mother's website, and they said to a bunch of people who don't like cricket, would you prefer it if the game went for 3 hours or 2.5 hours? Now, if I went to you and said, you don't like pizza, would you like to eat a family pizza or a medium pizza? You're always going to pick a medium pizza. So straight away they're on the wrong foot. Again, they went to the BBC. BBC are only showing 5 games. I don't care how long the games go on BBC. If you're only showing 5 games, you got no skin in the game, or how many games it is. It's not many.
I think it's 8. If I'm not
is
mistaken.
It 8? Yeah, it might be 8. You might be right.
Actually, it's 10. 8 for the woman, and if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Yes, but not the whole tournament. Yet.
It's not the whole tournament. And also, there are many ways within cricket that they could have shortened cricket. For instance, the most simple thing for me, and I think this would actually improve T20 cricket, would be to bowl 10 overs from one end and then 10 overs from the other. At the moment, we have Ben Stokes, one of the best fielders in the world, running from end to end, expending his energy on doing laps of the ground. Yep. Right? I want him to expend his energy on taking one-hand screamers above his head.
I know they do this at the recreational level. They're often 20-20 games on a weekday evening, and they just bowl the overs from one end, and in order to save time.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you could still do it from both. You could have 10 overs from one end, 10 overs from the other. So that would have saved them a lot. What I would have thought 20 balls worth of time, if they wanted to do that. So those are the sorts of problems. As far as look, there's clearly a problem with cricket in the UK. It's been pushed as a class game for too long, which means that working class people in this country either don't play it or don't want to play it. It's not in schools. The West Indian population, which was a huge thriving part of cricket in the 80s and 90s, have disappeared. If the Asian community do that as well, they'll be left with basically middle-class kids who go to posh schools, or it'll be passed down as a family heirloom. And I think it's a better sport than that. I think it's a more interesting sport than that. I think the fact that Nepal and Ireland and Afghanistan, places that don't have maybe the most traditional cricket backgrounds, are picking up the sport, tells you that it's a better sport than that. Kenya's another one. So realistically, there has to be something has to be done. I'm not sure taking 20 balls off and slightly tweaking the rules is going to make any difference to anyone other than confusing people further. But if, and my other problem is there's a big difference between cricket on free-to-air and a few games on free-to-air. The reason the Big Bash is such a success in Australia is because it's night after night after night after night. And the IPL is the same thing. This is not going to be like that. One game a week is not going to change anything.
Channel 7 in Australia, they don't cover every single Big Bash game. Fox have the rights for all of the games, but it was still a high percentage.
When Big Bash got popular, it was on Channel 10, and they played the game night after night after night. I think Cricket Australia made a massive error going to Foxtel, and I'm hoping it doesn't make as big an impact. But to be fair, Channel 7 do have, as you said, more games than what BBC would, so it's still shown quite regularly. Yeah. But there's a certain point, and it's not just about free to air as well. Most young kids follow sport through YouTube or through streaming services and these sorts of things. It's almost impossible to find cricket on those. Cricket Australia, the BCCI, the ICC, England Cricket Board, they all take all their footage off, whereas I think it should be used as a way of actually gaining new fans. Yeah. Those are the sorts of things that I think we should be looking at in cricket. Taking 20 balls away and giving it a stupid new name, I don't think is the most important thing. But city-based franchises...
But can it still be a success?
Can it be a success? Yeah, I mean, they're betting their future on it, so I hope it's going to be a success. My guess is it will be successful, but not to the level... They originally thought it would be like a Premier League football for cricket. I having been involved with it at a very small area, applying for jobs in it, and it's a very amateur league still. Yeah, it's nowhere near the level of the IPL, and the IPL is still very amateur in many ways. So, no, I don't think it's going to be the success. And in the same way, the Big Bash isn't the success that I think Cricket Australia thought it would be, but it's been better than a lot of the critics thought it would be. I think the 100 will fall in that middle ground again. And look, all it really needs to do is find a new audience, and it's done its job. That honestly, there's a lot of things that English cricket have got wrong of recent times. But if no traditional cricket fans go to this, but new audiences do, and families with non-traditional cricket backgrounds go to this, they'll have already done something. That's what they have to do. But they are betting a lot of their future on this. They've spent a lot of money on this. They now don't have a lot of money left. It has to work. My guess is that the Blast is successful. So having a more structured version of the Blast should be successful.
Right, so we're going to move on now. Pavel Florin, he's really been creating the headlines this summer over in Spain, I think it was, in that T10 club competition in July. Now, he's basically now an international cricketer with the new ICC rules that literally any country can play international cricket at a T20 level. So, say Denmark play Romania, Brazil play Argentina on an AstroTurf with one person in the park. That counts as an international game. Haven't they taken it a stretch too far? Is Pavel Florin really worthy of being an international cricketer? I mean...
Worthy? What does worthy mean?
I mean, in terms of his skill levels, look at the club cricketers in this country playing first 11 club cricket. They're never going to be international standard, but he is.
So? I fundamentally... I've stepped too far. What? If they're an international country and they play international sport, it should be an international. There is no... Right. We have created... What you were talking about pisses me off on such a big level. This is the reason our game has not grown, is right. What you've just said then. You've just said, he's not as good as people in another country, so therefore we shouldn't call him an international. Of course he's an international. If he plays an international game for Romania, he's an international cricketer. It is... It is an elite system to say that only cricket boards can decide on who should be called in international cricket. That is a nonsensical system, and that is why we are now at the situation where we only have 15 good sides in the world when we should have 100 good sides in the world. We have created that.
Do you agree with the step to literally give T20 international status to everyone?
Of course. And anytime, if I went and saw Sri Lanka play Malaysia in football, it was the world's 169th ranked team play the world's 199th team. I have to miss all those people that were saying that shouldn't be an international event. And I reckon I could have played for Sri Lanka, and I'm not even a footballer, and I wouldn't have been that out of place. I probably could have played centre back for them, and not been that out of place for them as a footballer. They were that bad as a football team, and yet we're all the people saying that they shouldn't be playing football. The Western Samoa play football and get beaten incredible scores at times. I watch international basketball. Some of the teams that play international basketball are terrible. Some of the people at the Olympics, I am a better swimmer than, right? That doesn't make them non-international. They're the best from their country, and this is how sport grows. When you say AstroTurf, you throw it away like it's a terrible thing. How do you think cricket in Pakistan and South Africa started? Where were their first tests played on? What was the surface it was played on?
Right. Okay.
What was it played on? I'm asking you.
Yeah, not on the surfaces that we imagine.
No, they were played on matting wickets, essentially AstroTurf, right?
Yeah.
Well, they were. That's essentially what it is. AstroTurf is a synthetic wicket put on a block. Do you know what matting is? A synthetic wicket put on a block. It's the exact same thing, right?
Right.
And you have no problem with that. Pakistan cricket and South Africa cricket have gone on, right? And South African cricket was pitiful when it started. How many years did it take New Zealand to win a test series? 39? We have created this stupid elite structure that we have taken from colonial nonsense, right? That you have to earn your right to play international sport. No, you don't. To play international sport, you need to be the best player in your country. That is what you do to play international sport. If you want to have a tier system where you say that Pavel Florin is not at the same level as A.B. de Villiers, well, of course he's not. Who's the number one goal scorer in the history of football?
Yes, yeah,
right?
Some Iranian player.
Right? No one thinks he's the best player in the world. Right. And we've even got it within cricket. The reason that no one talks about George Lohmann anymore is because he took a bunch of wickets against South Africa on non-turf pitches, by the way, when South Africa were rubbish, and they shouldn't have been in the game, right? So we know that George Lohmann's not the best bowler ever. We know he was still pretty good. We know he was an incredible bowler, but we also know that realistically, there were better bowlers than him just after his generation who didn't get to play against as poor players. We have the ability in our brains to work this out. No one is saying that a one-day international cap for Florin is the same as a one-day international cap for an Indian player, because they've had to beat out, an entire structure to get to that game. But that doesn't mean that they're both not international sportsmen. Cricket should be for everyone, and the thought that it isn't is why women's cricket isn't bigger. It's why associate cricket isn't bigger. It's why disability cricket doesn't exist. We have decided that the only thing that matters is basically the top 6 teams. Then it was the top 8 teams. Now it's the top 10 teams. We keep moving it slightly. An international cricketer is an international cricketer. And I believe in that very passionately. That doesn't mean that I don't know that Michael Leask, who plays for Scotland, I know he's not as good a cricketer as Nathan Lyon, but he's still a Scottish cricketer. He has earned that by being the player who's available. Florin turns up, right? And that is half the thing. And one thing I know about the history of cricket is a lot of these teams were absolutely rubbish when they started out, and now they're major teams. Sri Lanka probably should have been a test playing nation 30, 40, 50, 60 years before they were. We didn't make them that because we had these stupid elite rules. We lost Cricket Ireland and cricket in America and cricket in Argentina because of these sorts of things. Those have just gone. I want everyone in the world to play this sport. So no, I think everyone should do it. But I've got no problem with classifications. If you want to call what A.B. de Villiers plays a major ODI and you want to call what Florin plays a minor one, for stats purposes, for historical purposes, that's fine. We already do that. Okay.
In our heads, indirectly.
In our heads, indirectly, but also the way that we collect stats. Okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I collect stats in a way that the Hong Kong Blitz, for instance, is a T20 tournament. The Canadian global team, those stats don't go into normal T20 stats, right? We're already doing it, but as you and I sit here, women don't have a first-class cricket structure. There is nothing that is women's first-class cricket. Yet a university kid in England can play first-class cricket. So when you say that someone doesn't deserve it and someone does, Charlotte Edwards deserves to play first-class cricket, more than some university kid who fills in for his team because there's a bunch of injuries, right? So there's lots of inequality within cricket. I don't think that this is any problem. And the fact that once we've allowed them to do that, my guess is, and we've already started to see it, these teams are going to play each other more. So someone like, Florence not going to be playing in 10 years' time because Romanian cricket's going to be here. But that's the same as, there were some rubbish cricketers who played for, especially South Africa, some rubbish cricketers played for the West Indies early on. There was rubbish cricketers for generations for New Zealand. Then they suddenly had Richard Hadley, Sri Lanka took a long time to find Murali. These things happen, right? They don't happen overnight. You have to build a cricket culture. And one way to build a cricket culture is to get people wanting to represent their nation. If there's no international cricket for them to play and they're not allowed to play official games, then why would you get involved? Why would you, as the Romanian government, give any money if all you can play is basically practice games?
Right, we'll leave that one there. Your views are very clear. So you've disagreed on two things so far. One is Pavel Florin, one is the 100. Moving
I
on.
don't disagree with you with the 100 in general.
Yeah,
in fact,
yeah.
I hope it's successful.
Yeah.
I just don't understand why they did it.
Okay, but moving on, we have one-day international cricket returning to Pakistan tomorrow, with Sri Lanka playing, albeit with a slightly depleted side. Have you ever been to Pakistan? Is it something on the agenda? And
I've never been. I was offered a chance to go to a writing festival. I can't remember if it was Lahore or Karachi.
I think there's one in Karachi. Yeah.
Yeah, it might have been in Karachi. Sports writing festival. Right? No, it was a writing festival. I think with a sports section. But unfortunately, it was in the middle of Australia-India tour, and ESPN weren't very happy with me disappearing to Pakistan on my days off, and they're also a bit worried, of course, that I might not be able to come back in and complications with visas and all those sorts of things. I've wanted to go to Pakistan, since I first started following cricket. They were the team that sort of broke cricket free of an Australian sort of lock on me. I learnt leg spin by watching Mushtaq Ahmed and Abdul Qadir a little bit.
I remember on your blog you had a page of players you liked and players you disliked, and you had lots of leg spinners in players you liked, heroes and villains.
Yeah.
I remember, and you were very keen on Imran Tahir. At that stage, he hadn't played international cricket. He was just lighting up the county scene.
Yeah. I mean, it was quite clear seeing him in county cricket that was an international quality leg spinner. But I always loved leg spin. My dad basically took me aside as a cricketer and said, "Look, you can bat a bit, but you can't bowl medium pace. So why don't you try spin?" And he said that to my mate as well. My mate took up off spin, I took up leg spin, just so that our team had one of each. And then Mushtaq Ahmed sort of changed that a little bit when you suddenly see what sort of an impact that someone like him can have. So Pakistan cricket, through him, and I was 12 in 1992, so like a lot of young Pakistani people, that sort of, there was a Akram, the Imran Khan, the Cornwall Tigers, all that sort of stuff happened, and it happened at home for me. And unfortunately, by the time I really became a major cricket writer was 2009, 2010, and Pakistan weren't playing at home then. So I've kind of always said to my wife that if Pakistan ever play a test series at home again, I will go back, but I'm hoping to go back before then. But I want to go back to the first test series back in Pakistan.
So we're talking about test cricket there. Is it going to be, it's obviously going to be harder now with the introduction of the World Test Championship, because teams aren't going to send teams to Pakistan with a depleted side with so many points up for grabs. In the two test affair, only 60 points are available for a test or victory.
Well, my guess is that Pakistan will play a series outside the World Test Championship at home.
Right.
It would be my guess. Whether it be against, I know they've already talked to Cricket Island. Obviously Afghanistan's another choice. Would have been Zimbabwe, would have been a choice. Even the West Indies these days, there's a lot of those West Indian players already play in the PSL anyway, and I have no worries about going over there. If you're a young Jamaican player and you've grown up in Kingston, Pakistan doesn't seem quite as scary as it does to a lot of the Western guys. So my guess is something like that will happen, but I'll definitely go back to that. I'd love to work in the PSL as an analyst for one of the teams, or as a list manager, or as anything they would allow me to. I've been in discussions with PSL teams, but I've never actually taken up a job yet. Look, for me growing up, that two of the countries that I always wanted to visit were, because of cricket as much as anything, were South Africa and Pakistan. I think I'm going back to South Africa for my 4th time in a couple of weeks, and after that I'm going back again for my 5th time in a couple of months. So, having been there 5 times and having never been to Pakistan, it's an annoyance, and it's a place I'd love to watch international cricket. It holds a place very dear in my heart. It's quite interesting, like, especially being an Australian and coming to the UK, so many young cricket fans in the UK have this incredible pull to West Indian cricket, and I think it's because the West Indies were they grew up with a lot of Caribbean friends, and new people that they grew up with, and they had that sort of connection there. But whereas in Australia, we're so distant from the West Indies that other than the cricket team, we didn't have that much. And for me, Pakistan sort of became that other team that I love watching, and they were so good during the 80s, and they were so exciting at times during the 90s as well, that they sort of become that team for me. So, it's not ticking a box, but I'd be very disappointed if I, never end up covering cricket in Pakistan or working in cricket in Pakistan, and I don't think that will happen.
Presumably that's the only test country, along with Afghanistan, that you haven't visited.
And I haven't been to Bangladesh.
Okay.
No, there's a couple. I mean, I've been to random ones too that, not that many people have covered cricket in Ireland, and I have. I will, through working with Cricket Scotland, probably end up in Scotland. I've covered cricket in Hong Kong.
Out of the test teams, you've been Zimbabwe, have you?
I've not been in Zimbabwe either.
So Zimbabwe, Bangladesh, and...
so Bangladesh, I had the offer with Cricinfo to go to the 2014 World Cup, but I've been on the road...
T20 version, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, the T20 one. I've been on the road for 3.5 months out of 4 months, and I decided not to go. And I honestly thought at that stage I had another chance to go to Bangladesh, and I haven't since. I was actually, again, almost going to work for a BPL team recently, so until the shake-up happened there with their board. But yeah, look, to me... It doesn't really, again, we're talking about the sort of elite nations. Going and watching cricket in Hong Kong was incredible for me. The first time I watched cricket in Ireland, I went to a one-day at England-Ireland. And the passion that Irish fans had for a one-day, where most cricket fans around the world, outside of Asia, just go to get drunk, right? But for Ireland, to play England, it's the thing, right? It really matters. So it's not a throwaway game. They really, everything mattered to them. And it's the same in many different ways, in these sort of lower levels. So for me, it doesn't matter if I see cricket in every test nation, but I'd like to just see cricket in every nation that I possibly can get to. I've never made it across to Amsterdam yet. So I'd love to go there. Obviously, love to go to the Grange in Scotland, Kenya.
The Netherlands, you mentioned, they're in that ODI Super League, which commences next year. I'm sure you've come across that. I know that Pakistan, before they tour England next year, they've got 3 ODIs in Netherlands.
Exactly, yeah.
So
no, there's going to be. Look, hopefully there'll be opportunities.
Yeah, I know England also during the Super League they also play a series in Netherlands.
Yeah, Scotland are playing New Zealand next year as well, which is not part of the Super League, but the same sort of thing. So there's a little bit of cricket. So hopefully I can pick up 1 or 2 of those games.
Out of interest, I mentioned the Test Championship and I mentioned the Super League.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you can give me the answer for this one as a cricket writer. What happens if teams don't want to visit Pakistan and Pakistan don't want to play at a neutral venue for costs? Do Pakistan get the Test Championship points or the Super League points? I'm interested to know what happens in that scenario.
I'm not sure 100%, but I would have thought that Pakistan would have probably had to agree to the fact that most of their games would not be at home unless the other board agrees. Right. So I don't think I'd be shocked if they hadn't have thought of this in the regulations.
Right, because I know they're desperate not to use neutral venues anymore.
No, of course, but at the same time, they can't force anyone to go out there at the moment. They've got to prove, and they're starting to prove that, of course. But they've got to continually prove over the next couple of years to get some teams' trust back. And I think it will happen. But I would have thought there would be a clause in this that would be as simple as, a team is allowed to go and play in Pakistan if they wish. That's up to them. But we believe, for the purposes of this, that the home ground is UAE, Abu Dhabi, whatever, however it's worded in the piece. And it might even be just neutral venue. I think Pakistan probably missed out on, they tried in England and it went okay for the limited overs, but they weren't sure about the test matches. But realistically, there's test venues in Sri Lanka and England that go unused most of the year. And Pakistan haven't used them. I think that's a bit of a shame. And let's be honest, at this point, Dubai is the most overused, and Abu Dhabi, the two most overused cricket grounds in the world. When I was looking up, as an analyst, I have to look up what tournaments I might be available for. And at one stage I looked up and there were the World T20 qualifiers and the Afghan Premier League were both scheduled to be in Dubai at the same time.
Yeah.
The Afghan League, I think it's been postponed or cancelled or whatever has happened to it, but it was going to be moved somewhere else in the end. But that just tells you there's too much cricket in Dubai anyway, so it would be good if Pakistan could go home, but also maybe play in some of the other major venues around the world.
Right. On social media, I've been criticising Pakistan's decision to host this series against Sri Lanka and postpone the Test series, because in my view they need to be playing Test cricket and get back into the rhythms of Test cricket before they head to Australia. And I think it's a bit naive to think that these limited overs matches could act as a springboard for bringing Test cricket back to Pakistan, because obviously with the World Test Championship now, I cannot see Sri Lanka sending a team, say, without Angelo Matthews, without Karunaratne, without Kusal Perera, especially in a two-test affair with 60 points available for a Test win. So do you think it's a bit naive to think that this can act as a springboard to bring back a Test series to Pakistan, particularly with it being part of the World Test Championship? And wouldn't it have been better if they had played, say, a Test series against Sri Lanka, even if it had to be in the UAE, ahead of their challenging visit to Australia?
What's more important to the future of Pakistan cricket? A decent show against an average Australian team at home, or bringing cricket back to Pakistan?
But
I'm genuinely asking that question, because for me it's a no-brainer, but you might think differently. If there's even a 1% chance that this will help bring cricket back to Pakistan quicker, right, then they have to do it. And if they lose a series in Australia, they're probably going to lose anyway, right?
Yeah.
They shouldn't beat Australia with a fully the bowling attack and Steve Smith.
But they're long overdue something in Australia. I mean,
and they might win as well. They're not. I don't think they're a terrible side, but realistically, I think we're just in Australia.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So and also, is winning away from home against Australia? Let's say they did. It's a flawed Australian side, even if it does have some incredible players, and it's a flawed Australian side. Winning away from Australia would be really good. That next home series back at home would be incredible, right? And I'm just not sure. For me, I know which one is going to make the bigger change and the bigger impact on Pakistan cricket going forward. Even if the other one might bring more short-term love, I think it's worth it. As far as I do understand your general point about warm-ups and preparing for series, but I'm not sure playing Test matches in Dubai at all prepares you to play a Test match in Australia. If I'm being brutally honest.
Just getting back into the rhythms of Test cricket.
I understand what you're saying.
Batting long, bowling long spells.
Yeah, but it's not.
I understand.
Playing in Dubai and playing in Australia are almost two different sports.
Yeah.
In themselves, the best way to prepare to play for Australia is to have a really good, to do what they did in England those years ago, where they had that huge training camp where they got used to the conditions. That would do far more than the other one. Not to discount your general theory, because I know what you mean about rhythms and all that sort of stuff, but. There's. But
do you think it's naive to think that this could act as a springboard for bringing back Test cricket to Pakistan?
It's 100% what they have to do. They have to keep playing international cricket at home until it almost becomes normal. Because if they don't do it regularly, it's always going to be something that is seen as you don't have to do it. And eventually you want it to get to the point where what they want is essentially, if you take India out. You take England and Australia out. Of the other 7 or so major nations, you want them to think automatically, when we play Pakistan, we play in Pakistan, right? And until that happens,
I'm feeling confident about England, though, because a higher percentage of their players feature in the PSL. Even Alex Hales, who previously didn't go to Bangladesh, he turned out in Pakistan.
Look, England's possible. You've got to remember, it's not just the players, though, in England.
Yeah.
It's the other boards are a little bit more... casual, a bit more.
But I think England's next away Test series in Pakistan, or say against Pakistan, is in late 2022, around November 2022, and I think with Wasim Khan there and his links with the ECB, there's a realistic chance of possibly a Test match happening.
Look, out of England, Australia, and India. I mean, England is the most likely of those 3. But my point is that they are probably... I would have thought, considering how much their cricketers are worth to them, right?
Yeah.
As from a financial model, from an insurance point of view, they are very conservative boards as well. Like New Zealand might be like, do you know what, for the good of cricket? South Africa might be like, you know what, for the good of cricket, right? And the new West Indies chairman is very similar to that. We're willing to do it. If you guys are willing to go, we're willing to add this to it. I'm not sure that there are a lot of stumbling blocks to get one of those three major teams there, like, from insurance, from a logistical point of view, from a security point of view. So, India you can almost take completely off the board because of the political tensions. Australia, I think you can almost take completely off the board just because Australia didn't want to tour Pakistan when it was safe.
And I know Kevin Roberts has just been over, but even that's only going to be for us like a fly-in T20.
Maybe if that's a great sign, isn't it? I think. But I think to get a test team out to play a real series is a huge step on from, as you said. They might be helicoptered in for a game. They might be willing to do that. But I suppose my general point is, though, if you can make it normal to a lot of those other smaller nations, there's no real reason why Bangladesh shouldn't be touring there, or as long as the safety the conditions are.
And it's not like you can send the women's team or the under-19 teams of boards such as England or Australia either, because they all have the same protocol they've got to follow.
Exactly.
For example, I know England women, they're due to play Pakistan later this year in that ODI league they have to qualify for the 2020 World Cup, and I've heard rumours that they're going to play those games in Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur.
As I said, there's just a lot of extra things to get over with those major teams. Right. But I think you have to make it normal. You have to make it so that, let's say Scotland or the Netherlands is the next test playing nation, or Nepal. They're probably the three most likely, right? You almost want them to, by the time that they get their test status, you want them to be almost automatically willing to play in Pakistan, right? You want it to be such a normal thing again that they don't even think about it. You don't want it to be like Ireland at the moment, and Ireland are like, okay, well, we really do want to help. Pakistan came and played us for our first test. We really like the board. We really want to be involved, but how are our players going to feel? You want to get beyond that. Yeah. And the only way to get beyond that is to have 10 successful tours, right? Yeah. So every little tour counts. And even a tour where Sri Lanka don't send all their their main players, if it all goes off without a hitch and everyone reports that they had a good time, which is what's happened with the PSL, which happened with that stupid Giles Clark League, which is what happened with a few different things. So far, everyone's been quite happy with what's happened. But that has to happen for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, doesn't it? You need to build that. And that's what I mean. It needs to be a constant thing. It can't be once every year someone plays 2 one-days. It has to be more.
The long gaps aren't helping.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Last time Pakistan were in Australia, Ian Chappell made some comments that Pakistan should get their house in order before their next tour, and because of that long losing streak they had been on in Australia, they were whitewashed for the 4th consecutive time. A lot was made of his comments. My view is that playing Test cricket in Australia is of a higher standard than playing Test cricket in the Middle East, and it's more of a spectacle to play a Boxing Day Test or a New Year Test. So I think he had a point from that point of view. But what I was disappointed was he made those comments recently after Pakistan had been the number 1 ranked Test team. What was your view on those comments, and do you think there is a slight difference between playing, say, Test cricket in Australia and playing in the UAE? Because people's arguments were, well, we've just beaten you, hammered you in the UAE, how can you make those comments that Pakistan shouldn't tour Australia?
I mean, to be honest, I don't remember Ian Chappell saying anything, and there's a lot of ex-cricketers who say things and I don't pay any attention. Although Chappell is a very intelligent man, but it was, if he said that at that time, it would have.
We covered that series. Do you remember?
Covering that series and listening to what Ian Chappell said are not the same thing.
Okay.
But I mean, fans, remember these things that ex-players say. Michael Vaughan says a thing every day, and I don't remember any of them.
But do you get the point that if he does have a point, that playing Test cricket in Australia is quite special? You have to be prepared for these tours. People do turn out to the Test matches. Playing on Boxing Day, New Year, it's a real occasion.
I mean, forget that, although I understand, but there's no way you can prepare for that. Do you know what I mean? How do you prepare for playing in front of 80,000 people if you've never played in front of 80,000 people? There's no... What am I going to do, put a speaker in your face with loud noise? Sporting teams have been trying to overcome that one for years, and it's not a really easy thing to do. His basic point... Look, Test cricket in Australia... Australians don't get why the rest of the world doctors their pitches, right?
Right.
And the reason we don't get it is we don't have to doctor our pitches. Our pitches are so different to everyone else's pitches, right? They basically favour bounce and pace, and you get really good carry. We probably have, even our lower bouncing pitches, so SCG for years, probably had more pace and carry in it than most of the quickest pitches in many other countries, right? So we are playing, you come to play cricket in Australia, you're playing a different form of cricket straight away, right? Even South Africa has a couple of pitches like that. They have a lot of pitches like New Zealand and England as well, whereas Australia doesn't really, Australia just kind of has this one kind of pitch with subtle variations between them, although less variations now that there's so many drop-ins. But to prepare for that, it is hard. And I don't think teams have necessarily always done that correctly. That, if I remember that period, they played West Indies at home, then they played New Zealand away, and then Australia away. There was nowhere, so they played Dubai, New Zealand, Australia. There's nowhere to prepare for Australia in that. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's a basic thing of you need to actually prepare to play in Australia, because that first, the first few games, and I think one of the pitches they went on was that they got done over by a terrible pitch where it didn't bounce up north, which they were unlucky to get. But they didn't prepare enough. Anyway, they didn't have enough preparation in the country, and if you've ever played cricket, there is a huge difference between playing in Australia, where the ball constantly comes up here, and in other countries where the same length is around your thigh. It is a different form of batting, and you also need to understand the lengths. It's a different form of bowling. So, in a very real sense, what he's saying is correct, and the problem is that the calendar doesn't allow for teams to do this, right? And if it did, teams would do it all the time. But there's too much cricket, and there's too many different formats of cricket to be able to prepare correctly for every series. Now, if Pakistan go, this is our legacy series, right? We have a chance to beat Australia. We know that their bowling's great, but we think we can nullify their bowling, with Shah Masood types and Azhar Ali types, right? Let's say that they thought that. They could do that, and then they go, well, the batting's weak. If we can come up with one good plan against Stephen Smith, we can probably chip out all the other batsmen without too much trouble, right? If they think that, then they should be spending 2 to 3 weeks preparing for that tournament. If they don't, and they think that no matter what they do, they're probably going to get done, is their time not better spent somewhere else? And do they even have that time? Do you know what I mean? And that's where international cricket becomes very, very tough and very, very unforgiving. And you're seeing it, the associate teams are now learning about this. Before, the associate teams used to spend 2 or 3 months preparing for something, which meant when they hit a tournament, they were ready to run. Now, as you just said, the Netherlands are off in this tournament. We just had, a bilateral series there. You've got teams, what was it, about a month ago, Scotland were playing, who was it, Oman and Papua New Guinea. Now Oman and Papua New Guinea are playing in the USA, and Scotland are playing a different format. So even at the lower level that's happening, and we know that teams are overexposed at the upper level. It is very hard to prepare for individual series, and I feel sorry for the players, because quite often they're thrown into situations that they're never going to succeed in.
Right. So since you've come into this industry, you've not seen an India-Pakistan test series because there hasn't been one since 2007. As a fan, how disappointed are you about that? And do you have any hopes of a possible test series between Pakistan and India, apart from perhaps meeting in a test championship final or something of that sort?
Well, India would have to change government in order for that.
How disappointed are you as a fan, as a writer, not being able to cover an India-Pakistan test series?
Yeah, as a writer, massively so. It's probably
12 years.
It's probably a book, isn't it? If it happens now,
is Virat Kohli really going to go through a whole test career without playing a single test match against Pakistan?
It's ridiculous, isn't it? And it would, and especially because at times they've been, I don't think they've ever been number 1 and 2 in the rankings, but they've certainly been 2 of the best 3 or 4 teams a few times over the last couple of years. At that
time when Pakistan got to number 1 under Misbah after that England tour.
Did India then go to number 2?
Yes,
or
yes. I think that
or India might have taken over Pakistan, so you're right.
Yeah.
So they've even been 1 and 2, and there's been plenty of times when they both had good sides as well. As a writer, it's one of the things that I would love to cover. I've covered almost everything else in major cricket that I've wanted to. The two things are basically left are Pakistan, really, which is a Pakistan tour and India-Pakistan test series.
What's the bigger loss of Pakistan cricket? Not being able to stage games at home, or not being able to play India and therefore bring in that revenue?
No, play at home. Play at home.
Okay.
You can't make money. You can't move forward. The structure has gone nowhere.
Often people talk about not being able to play at home, but there's another big reason. Like a big factor that's weighing on them in terms of not being able to play India, not being able to
they're both huge.
IPL.
But I just think from a fan perspective that it's a bit like we were talking about before. If you beat Australia in Australia, it's incredible, but it's a short-term game.
Yeah.
Whereas playing at home is a consistent thing. To keep everyone engaged with cricket,
irrespective of the quality of cricket. I mean, let's face it, this Sri Lanka side aren't going to be very competitive.
But they could win. You never know, but they shouldn't.
Yeah.
But essentially, every little bit of cricket at home counts. So I think that's the most important thing. So yeah, as a writer, it annoys me that I haven't been able to do it and may not be able to do it. As a fan, yeah, it's terrible. As much as anything, that you want to see the best teams play against the best teams, and they have been two of the best teams. And it's a kind of ridiculous situation where I'd love to see, guys like Misbah and Yunus at their absolute peak. You would have loved to have seen them against, Ashwin. Yeah. And, now you've got Bumrah coming through. We're in a point where we could have Bumrah on one side and Babar on the other side. Yeah. And they might, as you said, and Virat Kohli is another perfect example. Virat Kohli is never going to face Mohammad Amir in a test match. And,
unless Mohammad Amir's packed up now, so yeah.
No, but that's happened. That's what I mean. It's already happened.
Yeah.
He's never going to face him in a test match. That's not going to change. Yeah. And those are two incredible cricketers that would have a brilliant a rivalry in Test cricket. They're quite, they've had some good rivalries in one-day games and T20 games at times as well. So those sorts of things, and it's something that cricket needs to work out a way through. It's ridiculous that they don't play each other, and I don't think it's good enough. And I think the government should shove off really.
I think one way this could be overcome is, say they feature in a World Test Championship final either in 2021 or 2023, and that game's a real success, and then the whole cricketing world is calling for it. Is that a possibility?
I don't think it's a cricketing world thing. It's too much of... I just can't see with the BJP in power in India how they'll ever allow it.
If they meet in a Test Championship final...
I'm not saying they can't play in the Test Championship.
That would be a starting point of possibly getting somewhere.
You'd need several things to change within Indian culture at the moment, and the major one is the political party. And I honestly don't see how they play a bilateral series while BJP... As BJP currently are, BJP might change as a party slightly as well, but as the BJP currently are, I cannot see how they can allow that to happen.
I know Pakistan women's team, they're due to tour India as part of that ODI league. Yeah. And I remember last time in the last cycle of the ODI league to qualify for that Women's World Cup, they gave the points to Pakistan. So I'm interested to see what happens over the next couple of months.
And we obviously, 2016 tournament, Pakistan played over there. There were some problems.
They had to change venue, didn't they?
Yeah, it was a silly venue for the India-Pakistan anyway, the first venue that they chose.
Dharamshala, wasn't it?
Yeah. But they then played it and it went fine. The women have played. I think one of the disability sides might have played each other. There's been some junior cricket at times, I think maybe on the women's side, maybe not the men's side. There's a certain point where, lots of India-Pakistan teams actually play against each other. It's just that because it's so high profile, it's used as a political football, and it shouldn't be. And also, if anything, it should be used the opposite to show that there isn't that much, that separates any nation, and that you can come together playing sport. And I think it's kind of nonsensical. But I'm sure there's a lot of barks out there that will attack me on Twitter for saying that. But essentially, of course, India and Pakistan should play. And of course, most people in cricket would want that to happen.
So we touched on the Test Championship there. What are your overriding views of it? Obviously early days, but what are your initial impressions of it, and in terms of the concept as a whole? Likes, dislikes, etc.
Well, basically, it's been brought together so we can sell Test cricket as a TV package, right? So instead of Pakistan, let's go smaller than that, New Zealand playing Sri Lanka, them having to sell their rights individually to two markets that are a bit disinterested, right? The ability to sell everything as a package and make more money out of it in total. That is what the overriding idea is, and it will safeguard Test cricket. It's the best idea for Test cricket going forward. The actual league is a disaster.
Simply because not everybody plays everybody?
Not everyone plays everyone.
The point system?
The point system doesn't work. And also, it should be 8-8 and 6-6, whatever, however you want to stretch out the league. Having, was it 9-3 is a ridiculous system. And which was brought in because teams like Sri Lanka and the West Indies were afraid that they would no longer be relevant. Well, that's how international sports work. See, this is the thing that we don't do in cricket. I find it ridiculous that you can get your test status in 1890, was it? For South Africa. And you can never lose it again no matter how bad you play. Right? You actually need to be corrupt to lose your test status, right? At the elite level, if someone has a lot of good runners in 1890, they're not still getting all their runners in the Olympics if they're not passing Olympic times, right? You still have, there should be a part of that. That's how sport should work. The best teams should qualify. There should be no automatic qualifications. And I've got no problems with teams everyone playing Test cricket if that's what they want to call it. But the first division of Test cricket should be the teams who have earned it. And when you put in a system where basically you've set it up so that it's almost impossible for any of the major teams to get kicked out, that's against what sport stands for, right? The best teams deserve to play the best teams, and they do that by qualifying by playing the average teams. That's how it works. So this system sort of makes a mockery of that to start with. And I understand it because if you are from Sri Lanka or the West Indies and you've seen the way that England and Australia run cricket and you see the way that India has also looked to run cricket. They don't really care about the minor nations. But it's up to Sri Lanka to be consistently successful. It's up to New Zealand and West Indies and South Africa and Zimbabwe and Ireland to be consistently successful. And if you're not being consistently successful, how many great football nations have not qualified for the World Cup? It happens, right? Winners of the World Cup in football don't automatically qualify. And you see a situation where these teams have to go out and qualify in times, and that's how
I guess we've slightly got that now with the ODI league to some extent.
Yeah, it's coming in, and cricket's working it out. And to be fair, the people who run cricket, who are the nuts and bolts of it, ICC people and CEOs of different boards, they get it. But it's this old sort of legacy competition, that doesn't make any sense to me. West Indies shouldn't play at the top level of Test cricket because they were once brilliant at it. They should play at it because they consistently prove that they're of that quality, right? And it also, when they had to qualify for the World Cup, they've talked about it, the players themselves, and also the structure of West Indies cricket. It was a huge wake-up call for them to be like, we've been coasting, and we actually have an incredible amount of talent in the West Indies, and we are now falling behind to a point where Scotland almost knocked them out of that World Cup, right? Maybe the best thing that could have happened to West Indies cricket was for them to even get a further jolt and be knocked out by Scotland.
They've already missed the Champions Trophy, haven't they?
Exactly. So those sorts of things are hugely important. And I'm talking to West Indian cricketers and administrators about this. They now are starting to get that. I think that kind of jeopardy is something that we can build into cricket, and it'd be great. And the Test Championship had that chance, and it didn't do it. And that's what's disappointing to me. I would have followed Division 2. Division 2 with the back six teams would have been really fascinating to watch. I'm not sure who's the 7th ranked team in the world. But
out of interest, say Ireland, Bangladesh, sorry, not Bangladesh, Ireland, Zimbabwe, Afghanistan. Is there any way they can get into the Test Championship now?
They can, but it's a tougher situation, and also they would have played more cricket under the other system. So there are many different things, but they can certainly still go up, but everything's sort of stacked against them.
I'm sure the ICC would have thought long and hard about this concept and this whole. You have 6 bilateral series in a 2-year period, capped at 120 points. Obviously, they had to find a way of. Not everybody playing everybody because India were never going to play Pakistan.
Yeah.
So I'm in favour of it. I'm sure they would have thought long and hard of it and come to this conclusion.
But when you say they thought long and hard of it, basically what you're saying is they thought long and hard of how to make it work when they knew it wouldn't work, right? That's what they've done. That's what they tell me privately. They know it's not perfect, but they also, as I said, if it ends up being a proper league, and ends up being sold as an entire TV package, or what will be in the future a streaming package, so that you and I can buy cricket.tv, right? We can go on to cricket.tv, which the ICC, I believe, own, and we can literally go on and we can watch a Test match anywhere in the world, and we can pay for that. We can watch them all legally with proper commentary, and not pop up Bangladesh Bride websites, and not on Russian websites that are probably taking our information and giving it to Donald Trump or whatever happens with those sorts of things. We can do it legally, and then we can look at every county game and every first class, anything with the camera we can watch and we can pay for. And all that money filters down to all the players and all the boards in the world. Then it's worth doing a flawed league to get to there. And that's what the ICC people are basically saying on the doors. They know the point system is an absolute disgrace. When you say they thought long and hard about it, they thought long and hard how to make it better, and they couldn't come up with anything. And they've come up with a silly system that doesn't quite work, because they know that in the long run, no one cares if this first section is stupid, and it is stupid. They care that in the long run that they can bring... Test cricket will not survive if all the small nations have to continually do their own rights deals. It has to be brought in. That is how international sport works. That is how franchise and leagues sports now work. You have to sell them as a package, and that is the only way to ensure that Test cricket doesn't die outside the major 3 or 4 nations.
Do you feel in England we're a bit too Ashes obsessive when it comes to Test cricket? I mean, we've just had an Ashes series concluded, and we're already seeing some pundits and commentators talk about the next Ashes series in Australia, and that's after this World Test Championship cycle concludes. And look at next summer, Pakistan are coming over. The last 2 times they've been in England, 2-1, West Indies are coming over. You know, they beat England last time they met in Test cricket in a series, and they won a Test match last time they were in England. Do you feel we're just too Ashes obsessive in this country? For example, those Test matches that we were talking about earlier off air, in Sri Lanka, there's a lot of relevance in those Test matches. 60 points available for a Test win, whereas in the Ashes it was just 24. In South Africa it's just 30. Do you feel we're just a bit too Ashes obsessive, and is the World Test Championship going to change this with more points available for Test victories in these shorter series and perhaps less iconic Test series?
The problem is, on a basic level, that Australia and England and probably India are in this a little bit. If they have to keep playing these long series, it's going to make it really hard for any of them to win World Test Championship, right? Right. So the teams that are most likely to win it are really Pakistan, New Zealand,
or at least get to the final.
Yeah, or get to the final, or South Africa. They're the ones who should win it because they have shorter series, right? So in order for England to be less obsessed about this sort of stuff, they have to be good at it. And at the moment, they've got a very 50-50 Test team with a lot of flaws to it, which can play brilliant cricket and horrendous cricket. So chances are they're not going to make the World Test Championship. So, of course, the Ashes are going to be big. You would hope that in 20 years' time, we have a proper league structure in Test cricket. More teams are being brought in all the time. We have a promotion and relegation type system, so the best teams are playing the best teams, not the oldest teams playing the oldest teams. And that other teams are good enough, that Ireland, Afghanistan, Nepal, whoever it is that comes in next are good enough as well. And if that's the case, then, maybe the Ashes will be slightly less relevant.
Yeah, but ask Joe Root, what would he rather prefer? Win the World Test Championship final in 2021 or later that year go to Australia and win?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter what Joe Root cares about because the World Test Championships just started. So basically, I don't know how old you are, but cricketers never used to take one-day cricket seriously, right?
Yeah.
Not at all. They used right through the 90s, right? Players just played it because it was something to play. Mm-hmm. But the generation of Ricky Ponting through to Virat Kohli, they grew up watching it on TV, seeing World Cups and seeing all those things, and they thought it was serious. They didn't know that it was muck about. And we're seeing the same thing with T20. We're seeing a young generation of T20 cricketers coming now, taking it uber seriously, partly because of the money, but also because they don't know any better. If Kyron Pollard's playing in it, and MS Dhoni's playing in it, and Jasprit Bumrah is playing in it, and they're all playing as hard as they can, it's a serious thing. They don't realise that there's a few guys still playing in the Blast who wish they weren't there and wish they were with their kids that day, right? So there's a certain point, it doesn't matter if Joe Root believes that the World Test Championship is important. It matters that the kids watching in the future start to think it's important. That's how it will be a success. And that's exactly the same when you can go back to the 100 with that if you want as well, right? And it also goes back to the Florin argument from before, right? None of these things really matter because essentially it matters in 20 years' time if Romanian cricket is better. It matters in 20 years' time if the World Test Championship is still around and is helping cricket. And that's what matters. And the Ashes is always going to be bigger to some people than it is to others. Australia and England don't have the same kind of rivalry as nations that they did. Australians don't look at England as much as the mother country as we once did, right?
Yeah.
which is why the Ashes aren't quite as big for us as they are for England. England still, it's the main sporting international rivalry. So Germany in football and cricket, it's Australia. England really believes in those two rivalries in a way that Australia sees sport as sport against the world, right? So the Ashes is already smaller now than it's ever been. Whether it will ever be a tiny thing, I don't know, but there's a part of me that thinks it shouldn't be because it is such an important legacy. You've got to remember that the Ashes is older than the Olympics, right? If the Ashes is not big, then that makes me worry a little bit. I get your general point though, and I think that Australia have proven over the last 20 years they want to win the Ashes, but they also want to win the World Cup, and that they also want to beat. They also want to beat everyone in the world. That's if you're talking about growing a game and being better at it, that's a much more healthier mindset than we have to just win the Ashes. But to be fair, in the last series, which team prepared better for the Ashes out of the two teams? It was clearly Australia. Australia spent 3 years preparing for those Ashes. And England basically spent 4 years preparing for the World Cup and then tacked on an Ashes at the end. So maybe things are starting to change in England, but it's happening at the playing level rather than the fan or the media level.
Right. So we had the Great Champions Trophy in 2017, a great spectacle with India and Pakistan locking horns in the final, and that tournament's now been terminated. I know they were initially planning to hold a 2021 tournament in India, but they converted that into another T20 World Cup, so they're going to be successive T20 World Cups. Just what's your view on that? Wouldn't you prefer to have another ODI tournament?
No, I hate the Champions Trophy. It's such a stupid tournament.
You asked the Pakistan players. That was the career highlight for many of them.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure there's a few West Indian players who feel the same and some New Zealand players who feel the same. But it's a stupid tournament. If it wasn't a stupid tournament, we wouldn't have changed it 10 times. We wouldn't have cancelled it. Is this the third time it's been cancelled or second? I think this is the third time it's been cancelled.
There were no plans to hold it in 2017. It was the Test Championship originally
exactly
in 2017.
Before that, it was cancelled completely at least once, maybe even. Do you know what I mean? If it was a great tournament that we needed and that would help cricket, I'd be on board. But a World Cup's almost exactly the same amount of teams. So you've got basically playing a Champions Trophy twice.
This is more of a knockout tournament, a bit more of a cutthroat tournament.
But it's not that knockout, and it's not that cutthroat. Actually, it's still another round robin tournament. It's slightly different, but it's kind of the same.
2 weeks, just three venues.
But how does it help grow cricket? Because that's what it was invented to do. Where was it played originally? Kenya, Bangladesh. It was supposed to grow cricket. It doesn't grow cricket. In fact, it's helped shrink cricket, and it's now it's basically one day cricket is essentially the third most popular sport internationally. I know it's not in certain markets, and you could certainly argue that in Asia, but internationally it is the third most popular sport. If it was up to me, the Champions Trophy would disappear completely. We'd play the Champions Trophy would probably disappear completely. We'd have one World Cup every 4 years. We'd have one World T20 every 4 years, and we'd have a one-day tournament and in the Commonwealth Games and a T20 tournament in the Olympics. And that would solve everything.
I know you've written about the Asia Cup and how that can be cricket's equivalent of the Euros.
Have I?
I think you mentioned something.
I've written a lot of things.
Something along those lines.
Basically, the reason that I like those tournaments is what the Champions Trophy makes money off you and me because we're cricket fans, right?
Yeah.
What the Olympics can do is, straight away, disability cricket isn't run by the ICC. It's got no money, it's struggling. I just written a big piece about the Physical Disability World Cup that had 5 teams and couldn't call itself a World Cup, right?
I think they called it the World Series in the end.
Yep. Sri Lanka couldn't come out because their board wouldn't ratify their team, despite the fact they had a team and they were good enough to come out. I probably would have done okay. Disability cricket straight away would be strengthened by having it in the Olympics because it would be there would be more funding from governments around the world. Women's cricket again would be more funded and would be pushed again. Global teams, you talk to people in Ireland and in America and Hong Kong, and they're like, their boards say, the government say to their boards, your sport doesn't even want you in it. Why would we give you money if your sport's not going to be in it? Once the Olympics is involved, that changes. So it happens. It helps that sport in many different ways, and also having a T20 tournament at the Olympics it's an exciting form of cricket that can get new fans and can help spread the game, not just to those who are already playing it, but hopefully to people who aren't playing it. You still have your major world championships, in the World Cup. The Commonwealth Games is another way of spreading one-day cricket if you want.
And luckily we have got women's cricket in the Commonwealth Games
coming through, yeah.
Birmingham.
That would mean that every year, right, if you scheduled it correctly, you would have a major cricket tournament to look forward to, right? Isn't that enough? Isn't that, more than enough? There's so much cricket already. Banging in the odd Champions Trophy. When we think we need to make more money, I'm not sure how it helps the game in general.
Do you think it's gone for good now?
I have no idea. I thought it was gone for good about 15 years ago.
Well, I think with this ODI...
Do you know what the original name of it was?
ICC Knockout Trophy, yeah.
That's not even the only name. I think it had another name as well along the trip before it got to Champions Trophy.
Cup or something.
Do you know what I mean? It's a ridiculous tournament that the ICC are bringing out to make money for themselves, right? And I respect that because the ICC have used the money quite well at times.
You don't like those white jackets on the podium?
Are they still around? Have they still got the white jackets?
They had them for the last tournament, yeah.
Yeah, they've had them a couple of times, haven't they? I don't see the sense of that particular tournament when we can do more, right?
Right.
I think one major tournament every year for cricket, it would be incredible. And I think it's not just one major tournament every year, because you then have one major women's tournament every year. And then hopefully then we'd be able to grow and then have a major disability, because there's, without boring you on disability cricket, but there's physical disability, there's mental disability, there's blind, there's deaf. Even if they all have one major T20 tournament every 4-year cycle, we could have one of them. Do you know what?
Yes.
Those sorts of things. And also, you can now make money off women's cricket, and you can make money off these other tournaments.
But I guess Champions Trophy was specifically for 50-over cricket, having something else rather than just the World Cup. Almost like a Euros for cricket. But
it's not Euros for cricket if you have if the World Cup was 16 or 20 teams, right? I can kind of see your point, right? If you just you were going to have an exclusive tournament.
I think there's a distinction between the two.
But there's not a distinction between the two. The Euros is different to the World Cup because they have different teams.
Yeah. We
don't have different teams, right? We're literally doing the exact same teams twice in a slightly different format with a round robin. If we're actually going to do the Champions Trophy properly, do you know? I'd happily do a straight knockout.
Right.
Let's get the best 32 teams.
Like they did do initially.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. We're not at the point where teams ranked from about 18 to 32 are any good, right? That's fine. We know that that's a nonsensical round.
So you'd be in favour of a knockout tournament?
If it's something completely radically different, we are in a situation, right, where we are so dependent on essentially the Indian / Bangladesh, Pakistan market, right?
Yeah.
How do you know that cricket is going to be as big in India in 20 years' time as it is now? We do not know that. We know that they were once absolutely hockey obsessed and that stopped. We know that football is already starting to grab a stranglehold there. We know basketball starting to grab a stranglehold there. Middle class people, as they come through, maybe will want to move away from cricket because that'll be seen as maybe the working class game. We don't know what will happen, right, in these countries. We don't know what will happen politically with Bangladesh and Pakistan going forward, right? If you build your whole game around only going to the cricket nations who already like cricket, you are setting yourself up to fail. Any business in the world that only sells to existing customers without trying to find new customers eventually comes across a problem. We have to grow the game, and we can grow the game, and we have basically for the entire history of cricket gone the opposite way. And we are finally in a place where we have 15 good teams in the world. Oman are a legitimately decent limited overs cricket team. Netherlands are a really good team. Scotland are a very good T20 team. Ireland almost beat Pakistan and England and had their chances in both of those test matches to win them. We're now in a position where it wasn't that long ago, when I started writing cricket, everyone said, we're the only ones who like cricket. That's why we're the only ones who are any good at it. We now know how stupid that is. Afghanistan have blown that completely out of the water. Nepal are doing the same. Ireland are doing the same. We want as many people to play it as possible. And if we don't, then you're not really a cricket fan. You just like your team.
Right. So England, they have to name a successor to Trevor Bayliss shortly. What's your view on split coaching and possibly having a white ball coach and a red ball coach going forward? I don't know why we're not seeing more of it nowadays. I understand that it can be difficult to manage players. Test coach might want certain players, like they tried it in England with Andy Flower and Ashley Giles. Just
Yeah.
what's your overriding view of split coaching? Why are we not seeing enough of it, and will we see more of it going forward? And do you think England perhaps should have a split white ball coach and a red ball coach going forward?
They won't, because Ashley Giles hates the idea, and because he was the one who got done over.
Yeah.
If it was done properly, I don't think there would be. I would have a problem with it. In fact, it makes perfect sense to me, because having worked in T20 cricket as an analyst and with teams, and having worked as a journalist for a long time in Test cricket, the actual coaching is going to go more and more separate, right?
Yeah.
You don't. There are some coaches who obviously transcend and will be great at both, but there are some that are specialists, and the skills are completely different. You might even be in a situation. I'm trying to think if this. You could argue in England, for instance, that they are basically trying to build a Test team as they go at the moment, right? But their limited overs team is ticking over, both of them, right?
Having said that, I think England are a touch underrated in Test cricket.
Well, you didn't watch them lose as much as I have.
Undefeated series record for 9 series in a row at home.
That's nothing. They shouldn't be. Every good team should have that.
And in the last 10 years, they have won Test series in Australia, India, and South Africa.
Oh, in the last 10 years have been good. I'm talking about the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
They're a very inconsistent team. My point is that they don't know who their opening batsmen are. They don't know who their middle order is. They've just dropped their wicket keeper. They're not 100% sure who their spinner is, right? So, the players who are coming into that side will need actual coaching and mentoring and guiding, right? In the T20 team, almost everyone they have, and the one-day team, is a seasoned pro, top of their game, IPL player, PSL player, lots of international experience. To coach those two different... There's two different coaching mentalities, right? Yeah, you might be able to find a coach who does both. But a lot of times you'll find a coach who's really good at taking a really good team of professionals and getting the most out of them. And there'll be another coach who's a very good learning coach, a very good teacher, who's very good at taking undeveloped players and making them slightly better. Those two people don't always exist in the same body. And it's not particularly easy from the outside to work out, if someone can do both of those things, right? So, from that point of view, you can understand why. Then you've got the speciality, as I said. Coaching in white ball cricket, especially in T20, is nothing like Test cricket anymore. And not to say that coaches can't do both, but they are very separate jobs. There's also the time, if you're a T20 coach and that's all your job is, and you're spending 12 months of your year preparing the England team for that means that you're spending 12 months of your year on that one format. Bayliss has got hands in many different pies. He's preparing for the World Cup, but he's probably been told, look, we have to have a meeting on the Ashes today, right?
Yeah.
Those sorts of things are very realistic. But the biggest problem is that while I agree with you that you probably should have separate coaches, it's how it actually works on a day-to-day basis. And when Bayliss did it, it didn't... when Giles did it, it didn't work because Giles felt that whatever Flower said went, and he was left with scraps, right?
Like resting players for Test series.
Exactly. And I'm not sure how that particular thing we can ever get past. But I think eventually what will happen is... So cricket was never a coach game, and now it's a massive coach game. But the next big change will be the general manager role. They're going to be the most important people.
Almost like you have in football?
Yeah, well, what you have in American sports to a certain point. So, we'll have scouts, we'll have recruitment sections, we'll have coaching sections, but we'll have one person who oversees that. We're already starting to see it in some IPL teams, and I obviously did that role a little bit in St. Lucia. There's a couple of CPL type guys doing that as well. So those jobs will come in because that's the only way to do it properly, because then you're not going to the other coach and saying, can I have this player? Literally, the general manager is going, okay, look, this is what we're going to offer. He's going to be arrested, he's going to be arrested from this Test series because there's a World Cup coming up afterwards, right? But then we're going to have to do it the other way and get the most out of our players. And we have decided as a franchise, not as a franchise, but as an international team, that we're going to prioritise this, this and this, okay? And you know that as you're coming in as a coach. And I think the problem is, coming in with Ashley Giles, is I didn't do that. It's still a very amateur situation, and one of the biggest problems with cricket is that because we haven't had a lot of people from outside cricket come in and have cricket positions, it's still run very much by people who are making small incremental changes to how cricket is run. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So instead of getting in, like in American sports, you've had Wall Street people come in, you've had people with completely different backgrounds come in, and they're willing to make very big changes. In cricket, you have very small changes. So, for instance, having worked with cricket teams, the amount of footage that cricket players watch is less than what a high school basketballer watches in America, right? And that's because it's never been a big thing in cricket to watch footage, partly because if to watch a full day's play in the old days would take 6 hours, and now with some of the new programs it's a little bit easier. But there's no one has come in and said, this is what we do as a team. Of course we're going to watch. You're going to watch your spell. You're going to watch your spell, and we're going to watch our fielding display, and that's what we're going to do now, so we can get better, right? Little things like that don't fly in other sports, and I think that is where the bigger changes will come, and then what you want of these split coaches will be something that we can get from that, would be my guess.
Right, so we've got the next World T20 now renamed as the T20 World Cup in Australia.
Yep.
And this one's going to be slightly different. Obviously, Australia have never won it before. Australia have never hosted it before. And it's been such a long time gap since the last one. I mean, it'll be 4.5 years by the time the tournament comes around next year. We've seen how well the Australian crowds have taken to the Big Bash. What are your expectations from the tournament in Australia next year? I mean,
what month is it?
Around October, November. So
here's my first problem.
Yeah.
Australian cricket crowds don't go to games in October, November.
Yeah.
Right? My worry is that that will continue and that you won't get many people in the grounds. I hope to be wrong, but there's a reason why the Big Bash is still in the middle of summer and they haven't moved it to February, March, or they haven't moved it to October, November, and it's because Cricket Australia are terrified of moving it away from the major summer period where people go to games. And I always thought they were wrong, but I'm starting to come around to their opinion of maybe they've got a point there. So I worry about that.
Just to interrupt you, the 2015 World Cup, I don't think it really appealed to the Australian public in the same way it did in New Zealand. Covering in the tournament there.
Definitely.
It didn't really, capture the nation's imagination.
No, I mean, look, it was there and thereabouts. It did about as well as I thought it would do, but in a very real sense, it's not when Australians go to cricket games.
Yeah. February, March time, yeah.
Yeah, and October, November is exactly the same. You're coming off the back of football season. There's not much on. There's not like there's anything else to take you away. November, depending on when they do it, there's the major race carnivals in Melbourne and Victoria. But other than that, it's not a major sports period for Australia. But it's also not a time that people go to cricket games. So that I do have a concern with that. As far as the tournament, I can imagine that it's a good place to play T20 cricket, isn't it?
I suppose you're against that concept of you're going to be working with the Scotland team shortly, and even though you might qualify for the tournament coming up in the UAE, you still have to go through an initial qualifying round in the main competition. I suppose you're strongly opposed against that concept.
Yeah, well, making teams double qualify for a tournament is nonsensical to begin with. If you've qualified for the tournament, you should be allowed to play in the tournament. Also, think about it from so the ICC then have to pretend it's the real part of the tournament, right? Which is the stupid bit. So who bowled the opening ball of the last T20 World Cup?
Right. I'm generally good with my cricket, so I'm going to hazard a guess to this.
Even if you could pick the two teams that started.
Yes, I actually remember.
Go.
Hong Kong and Zimbabwe, if I'm not mistaken.
Who starts a global tournament with two teams like Hong Kong and Zimbabwe in India? Right? There was no one there. I was at that game. I upset some of the associate guys by saying this is ridiculous, they shouldn't be starting this tournament. I think they should be in the tournament. I'm very pro them being in the tournament. I'm not pro them. The first ball was Hamilton Massachusetts ball? I can't even remember who it was. Or maybe he faced it. I'm trying to remember who that might have been the Hong Kong bowler, but
I remember there was a really dodgy run out early in that game.
It's just it's such a ridiculous thing, right? And then on top of that, so the ICC then have to pretend it's the real tournament, but no one does pretend it's the real tournament. No one sends out anyone to cover it, so you're missing a week of coverage of your tournament anyway. And just on top of that,
the premier commentators aren't there as well.
No one's there. Yeah. It was a ghost town. I was there for that week and a half. There was no one in town. It's one of the best week and a halves I've ever had as a journalist because I spent all my time with players and commentators and umpires because we're all stuck in the same hotel in Nagpur. If you've ever been to Nagpur, it's the only entertaining thing that could ever happen in Nagpur is hanging out with Gunnar Gould. Seriously, one of the dullest places on earth I've ever been to, and I've been to Perth. So, there's certainly, it doesn't make any sense from a cricketing point of view, from a sporting point of view. But that's how cricket is run, and unfortunately, you know, until we see the error of our ways and start to improve the way our sport is run, we're going to keep running into stupid things like this. But of course, if you qualify for the tournament, you should play in the tournament proper and not have to re-qualify. And you know, anyone who's seen Scotland play, or Ireland, or the Netherlands, I'm trying to think of some of the other, Oman, there's some really good cricketers coming through. And, you know, I'd love to see, you know, the Oman team, they're getting better and better all the time. You know, George Munsey is someone that should be in the major tournament. You know, and I just, you just want those players to have that, you know, it shouldn't be two teams, it should be more than two teams, I suppose is what I'm saying. And it's a world event, and world events should be... I
know they've slightly tweaked it this time, it's going to be Super 12s as opposed to Super 10s.
Which is slightly better, so it does mean... So I think last time...
there were 2 groups of 5 in the main draw, there are 2 groups of 6 this time.
Yeah. But was it? Yeah, but sorry. Last time it was it 4 teams playing in Nagpur and 4 teams playing in Dharamsala?
Yes,
whatever it was.
Right,
and 1 team qualified from each.
Yes, yeah.
And I'm not. Afghanistan qualified, and who was the other team? The Netherlands got a rained out game. Were probably one of the best teams. Probably deserved to qualify. Played 1 poor game. And we're out.
Bangladesh also qualified, yeah.
Yeah, and so they had qualified all the way through that. They were basically the best limited overs team in both formats, probably outside the sort of the major teams, right? And Scotland weren't far behind either. And you know, they were both 2 really good teams, and they don't get to go to the major tournament. One because they had to play Afghanistan, and Afghanistan were way too good to be qualified for anything at that point. And the other one because they had a rained out game. So you know, we shouldn't be in a situation where those sorts of things happen.
I think I'm right in saying Afghanistan had qualified directly to the Super 12s this time. I know Sri Lanka have to go through the qualifiers.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I've got no problem with qualification, but I that whole thing of picking 1 team from each group when you're only playing, I can't remember the full numbers. It was 3 or 4 teams, so wasn't it? When you're not playing many games, and one of them gets washed out, and you've already Netherlands spent 2 years qualifying for that tournament, right? Yeah. They didn't qualify for it overnight. Every game the Netherlands play. Every game an associate team plays is almost a qualifier. Yeah. We're changing that system slightly. But up for a few years, every time they played, they were basically playing for a position to get higher in the ladder, right? They had done everything they could, and then they play 1 poor game and get rained out, and they're out of the tournament. And they didn't make the tournament proper. That leaves a very sour taste in my mouth, because qualification shouldn't be, you know, it should be a strenuous process, which, to be fair, but that is what cricket is going towards, and I'm all for that.
Right, so last question before we get onto the rapid fire. Now, we've had a good period in Test cricket of away teams not dominating, but having some success. New Zealand in the UAE, England in Sri Lanka, India in Australia, Sri Lanka in South Africa, and Australia holding their own here in England. How encouraged are you about the last year or so in Test cricket with away teams having success? Even perhaps the lesser teams. We saw Afghanistan win a Test in Bangladesh. We've seen Zimbabwe even win a Test in Bangladesh last year.
Yeah. No, look, I think it's just a competitive time of world cricket.
Do you think it's a bit of a myth? We always hear home teams are so strong at home and no one wins away. You generally would expect that, won't you? I mean,
yeah, I think it's off the top of my head, maybe it's 25% of the time. Tests are won by the away team, so you know 75% is quite a big gap. There's draws in that, of course, but I don't think it's anything to do with teams being better away from home. If we're being honest, I just think that the pitches are helping bowlers at the moment, and so the results are a bit more scattered. If that makes sense, we don't have many dominant teams. India may become that, but they probably haven't just yet. Although they've certainly got the most potential to do that. But you know, most England don't have any batsmen. You know, Sri Lanka's a very inconsistent team. West Indies struggle with batsmen. South Africa is struggling with batsmen. Australia is struggling with batsmen. That means that you know, and there's a lot of good bowlers in the world. You only need 1 or 2 bowlers to catch fire in one of these series. You know, beat a Jack Leach or a Steve O'Keefe type bowler even, or you know, one of your seam bowlers, and you run through the opposition very, very quickly. Which means that you know maybe away teams at the moment have a bit more chance. But I just think Test cricket's been really exciting over the last couple of years because the bowlers have been back in charge again, and that generally makes things more exciting. When batsmen are in charge, I think home teams probably dominate a bit more.
Just briefly relating it back to the World Test Championship, we're seeing lots of players retire. Say Dale Steyn, Hashim Amla, Muhammad Amir, Wahab Riaz, not playing red ball cricket. Do you think the World Test Championship appeals to players? Because in my view, this is the best time to be a Test cricketer. Test cricket has become more fashionable with the introduction of the World Test Championship. There's more context. Surely playing in a World Test Championship final has to be a major incentive for a player going forward.
How old are Wahab Riaz, Dale Steyn, and Muhammad?
I'm with you, but surely...
No, but they've got to think... we think about it from a cricket point of view, right?
Yeah.
Dale Steyn is one of the best cricketers I've ever seen. And he's one of the best cricketers we've ever had in world cricket, right?
Yeah, I'm with you.
And he has an 18-year career at best.
But do you think, I guess the question is, do you think in the back of his mind he would have thought about sticking around for the World Test Championship?
Oh, I'm sure. But I'm not sure he can get through a Test match, to be honest, physically anymore anyway. And he may know that. Hashim Amla... I guess
the larger question is, do you think there's more of an incentive now to play Test cricket and going around...
No, there'll be more of an incentive to play Test cricket when people are paid as much to play it as they are in T20. You have to make your money. You only have a 15-year career. Go to LinkedIn... and type in the name of your favourite first-class cricketers and see how many failed businesses they've had since they played, right? Yeah. There's not many jobs in coaching. There's not many jobs in schools. There's not many jobs in the media or in commentary or any of those sorts of things. What is it? Is it American sports stars? There's 70% of them are bankrupt within 5 years of retiring. Mm-hmm. Sports stars make all their money in one period of time. They usually don't know how to manage money. They have to look after themselves. And to be fair, in cricket, I think we're getting better at that. So it makes sense to me that Dale Steyn's like, well, in the next couple of years, I can make 300 grand playing T20 franchises, even if I'm not fully fit, right? Yeah. He can't make 300 grand playing for South Africa unless he owns the team, right? There's no money playing
I guess
national team.
Dale Steyn was probably not the best example.
No, but all of them, it's all the same.
Do you think young cricketers now... they'll find Test cricket more appealing with the introduction of the World Test Championship and people perhaps talking about Test cricket a bit more?
As I said to you before, that's not going to change in this generation of cricketers because they've already... You're talking about a 21-year-old who's already in the game. He's already made his mind up whether he likes Test cricket or not, right?
Right.
And most of them do like it. Most of them will still tell you they prefer it. There's a few that don't.
But you think this league will make some sort of...
It'll make it if it's successful. If it's not successful, then obviously it won't.
Initial impressions are...
Well, it's a disaster to begin with, isn't it? So, initial impressions are not good, but as I said, you don't have to worry about the first one. It'll be the second, third and fourth times when those sorts of things matter. But if you're talking to me about players, right, it comes down to, are you being financially looked after? Okay. And you make more money playing county cricket than you do for South Africa, right? Yeah. So if that's the case... And in Pakistan, as an international cricket, Wahab Riaz comes in and out the team. He could play T20 cricket for the next 3 or 4 years. There are going to be guys who make those decisions. And until there's enough money in international cricket, or until international cricket all but dies, they're going to have to keep making decisions. There are going to be people who are going to be brought up by certain parents and certain moral codes, and will be maybe more nationalistic, and they'll be like, country first, right? All power to those people. They get to make that decision. But I know I have so many friends who are ex-cricketers or soon-to-be ex-cricketers who are staring at no job prospects and not knowing where to go. And I know that you have to make your money when you are worth money, right? And if you are talking about the difference between making... I remember Chris Gale said to me when we interviewed him for Death of a Gentleman, he said, I think this is right, I make $1,000 a game for the West Indies. And I can make $50,000 a game in the IPL. What would you choose, right? Yeah. That we have to be realistic that these are the options of these people, and that Chris Gale, maybe because he's a batsman, has a 20-year career, if he's lucky. But the first, 6 years of his career, no one even knew who he was, and he wasn't getting paid anything, right? He's cashing in. People are going to cash in. The allure in future isn't going to be whether the Test Championship is a great... Saviour. What it will be is if the Test Championship can actually become something that pays players more money and that they don't have to make the choices. That's what we need.
It comes down to money.
It has to come down to money because these guys are not amateurs and we don't want amateur cricketers either. When amateurs played, it was just played by middle class people and posh people, right? We want it to be so everyone can have a chance. And, there is a certain point where you have to make that decision, and they don't have normal careers, these guys. They have short careers where they have to make all their money. And so, at the moment, I can't fault a single player for picking a franchise over a nation, knowing that what his future is.
Right. So just a couple of rapid fires to finish.
Sure.
Just a couple of predictions. Who's going to win the World Test Championship?
No idea. New Zealand.
New Zealand.
I have no idea. I haven't even looked at it. I'll worry about it. I'll worry about it on the day. I'll worry about it on day 3 of the final.
Perhaps the standout team in Test cricket at the moment.
That'd be India, wouldn't it?
India. Okay, so I suppose you'd go for India then.
Well, no, I still think the teams who play the smaller series are more likely to qualify. And it's tough. It's going to be tough for India, Australia, and England
because of the way this.
Just the structure of the actual tournament. Yeah. New Zealand, right at the moment, are quite a decent team.
Right.
They probably batted a little bit better than Australia and England for 1 to 7. Maybe they don't have as many good players as the other teams, but they have an incredible bowling lineup, and they have conditions that are quite often in their favour, and they play short Test series. Sounds like, pretty good way to... And they're not a bad travelling team.
Right.
There's a lot of things in their favour to make the final.
Okay, and I know T20 is hard to predict, but a year out from the next world event, who's going to win the T20 World Cup in Australia?
Look, if West Indies prepare properly and pick their best team, no one should get close to them.
Will Gale be past it then, do you reckon?
It doesn't matter. They've got 20 Gales. Rick Cornwall could be another... They literally have... The talent in that country is so phenomenal. Sorry, not that country. Those countries. Is so phenomenal. Seeing it up close, watching David Warner range hit, right?
Yeah.
Compared to guys you've never heard of from the West Indies range hit, it's a different species. What they can do in T20 cricket is basically almost Steph Curry the sport, in that they can mishit so many sixes, especially on big grounds like Australia. That other players can't, and they can bat all the way down if they want to. There's so many options available to them. I think to win in Australia, they might need Sunil Narine to come back, and I'm not sure what he's going to do, and whether it'll be called for chucking and all sorts of things for him. But if they can pick their absolute best team, they've got they've got proper pace. They've got incredible all-rounders. They've got proper left-arm options now. They have some of the best fielders in the world. And they can pick a team of 9 hitters and go from ball 1 and not stop. They could completely revolutionise the way the game's being played. Now, there's a lot that can go wrong with them, but they should be the best team based on talent. That's why they dominate T20 leagues around the world. It's because they are the best players in T20 cricket. Australia...
this is their big chance, isn't it, to finally...
Yeah, Australia have a chance.
World success.
India should be good. England should still be there and thereabouts. Pakistan have had some very good form in T20 internationals, although I don't really count T20 international form as a real thing, but they did. So they're obviously building something that's quite interesting there as well. But realistically, I follow all these leagues. The West Indians are here and everyone else is here. Okay. It's just whether they can put it together and whether it fits into a team as well. It's all well and good having 93 guys who can open the batting and hit sixes, but you need someone who can bat at 5 and 6 and 7 and it might also depend on how Pooran and Hetmeyer develop. But they're both Pooran might be the best young batsman in the world at the moment, and I don't even think he's anywhere near his peak.
Okay, so we'll leave it there. So India, the standout team in Test cricket at the moment, although you think New Zealand, because of the way the Test Championship is structured, you feel they've got a very good chance.
Mm-hmm.
And looking ahead to the T20 World Cup and that tournament next year in Australia, you fancy West Indies. If they pick their best players, they're going to be hard to beat. So we'll leave it there.
Can we? What about the women?
Of course, the women's T20.
I think Australia will win that very easily.
Yeah,
that's not even a competition.
Yeah, that's in March this year, and they're hoping to sell out MCG on International Women's Day, if I'm not mistaken.
It'd be incredible. We just had 50,000 people for India. Was it 50?
Yeah, I saw something.
I think I got that number right for India, South Africa.
Although in a city where no international cricket had ever been played before.
But that's also kind of amazing as well, because there's no culture about going to cricket games. So it kind of works both ways. But you're right. I mean, look, it's incredible. Having covered the Women's World Cup over here, I missed the next tournament, sadly, because I had a Sri Lanka tour, I think.
The Women's T20 World Cup last November.
Yes, I missed that one, but I did the World Cup over here. And the amount of people who were like, this will never work, you guys are all crazy, it's only a bunch of cricket hipsters. And then to see the explosion throughout all three finals. Both semi-finals were incredible in completely different ways. The
I've
finals
always wondered why Australians refer to semi-finals and quarter-finals as finals.
Well, they're knockout games.
Yeah, right.
Is what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't think they have quarterfinals in that tournament, do
No,
they?
but generally in Australia, they sometimes confuse people by saying getting ready for the finals when it's quarterfinals.
We've also invented our own finals. Preliminary final only exists in Australia and is now part of the IPL, which is our proudest export, I think, of all time. We invented a final. We love finals that much.
Yeah, and I know they've changed the Big Bash structure as well. Like there's going to be five teams playing finals.
Mate, we've been talking for 2 hours. You get me talking about the Big Bash structure, we'll be here for a week.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll leave it there then. So thank you, Jarrod, for your time and
no problems.
For your predictions at the end as well.
Cool. You happy with that?
Yeah, good.